For centuries, Velmara had been a sanctuary of peace, a world where the twin suns painted golden horizons, where the air carried the scent of blooming flora, and where art and knowledge were cherished above all else. The Velmarans were a species that had never known war. They had no standing military, only a modest fleet of defensive ships and energy shields. Their history was one of progress and harmony, untouched by the darkness that had swallowed other civilizations. Until now. The sky darkened with an ominous presence, and from the farthest reaches of space a massive shadow loomed over the planet. The stars themselves seemed to dim under the colossal fleet that advanced toward them. Inside the Grand Council Hall, alarms blared. A holographic display flickered, its crimson light casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. A single, chilling message flashed across the screen. The Marad Dominion's fleet is approaching Velmara. Total planetary invasion imminent. Elder Seraphine, the leader who had guided her people for decades, stood at the center of the chamber, her hands gripping the edge of the council table. Her usually serene face was set in a grim expression as she spoke. "Our defenses are not enough," she said, her voice steady but tense. "We have reached out to our allies, but none can arrive in time." A heavy silence filled the chamber. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. They were alone. The Velmarans had seen what happened to other worlds that had fallen to the Marad Dominion, an empire that conquered and enslaved entire civilizations. Surrender meant chains, resistance meant destruction. Then Elder Thalric, a historian known for his vast knowledge of ancient records, cleared his throat. His eyes were shadowed with a mix of doubt and hope. "There is one possibility," he said slowly. "A desperate gamble, a plea to forces beyond our reach. But if ever there was a time to risk the impossible, it is now." Seraphine turned toward him, frowning. "What do you mean?" Thalric hesitated, then spoke the name that had not been uttered in Velmara for generations. "The humans." A murmur spread across the council. The humans. Stories of them had travelled across the stars. Some tales spoke of their brutality, others of their unmatched resilience. They were a species known for adapting, for defying fate, for turning the tides of war, even when facing annihilation. "But the humans are unpredictable," one council member objected. "Some say they are reckless and war-driven. Could we trust them?" Thalric nodded solemnly. "Yes, they are unpredictable, but that is exactly why they might be our only hope." Seraphine took a deep breath. She had no reason to trust the Terrans, but she had no other choice. "Send the message," she commanded. "Tell them Velmara calls for help." The distress signal was carefully crafted, its contents urgent, desperate, pleading for assistance. There was no guarantee that it would even reach Terra, and if it did, no certainty that the humans would come. That night, Velmarans went about, their lives unaware that their world might not see another sunrise. Children played in the golden fields, artists painted under the twin suns, and families gathered for their evening meals. A quiet, painful beauty clung to the moment, fragile, fleeting. Seraphine waited by the communications console, watching the void of space for a reply. Hours passed, then a day. Doubt crept in. Had their plea been lost in the emptiness of the universe? Had humanity chosen to ignore them? Then, just as hope began to wither, a small light blinked on the console. A message. Seraphine's heart pounded as she read the response aloud. "Terra has received your distress call. "We are coming." The words sent a shockwave of disbelief through the council. They had taken a gamble, and against all odds, humanity had answered. Now, all they could do was wait. Days passed, filled with anticipation and fear. Every Velmaran citizen felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Then, on a night where the twin moons hung heavy in the sky, the heavens trembled. A colossal warship, larger than anything the Velmarans had ever seen, descended from the atmosphere. It was a monolithic beast of steel and fire, its armored hull bristling with weapons. The ship hovered over Velmara's capital, casting a massive shadow across the city below. It did not feel like a rescue vessel. It felt like a storm had arrived. As the ship's ramp lowered, figures emerged, humanoid, clad in dark combat armor, their movements precise, disciplined, unshaken. At their head was Commander Rael Darien, his eyes scanning the gathered Velmarans with quiet intensity. There was a sharpness in his expression, the kind forged from years of battle. Seraphine stepped forward, willing herself to stand tall. "Welcome to Velmara," she said. "We are grateful, beyond words, that you have come." Rael nodded. His expression was unreadable, but his voice carried an undeniable authority. "We received your call," he said. "We are here to help." The Velmarans had expected saviors. What they got were warriors. Standing at Rael's side was Lieutenant Kalis Voss, her expression as unreadable as her commander's. The rest of the human soldiers remained still, watching, waiting, calculating. There was something ferocious about their presence. These were beings who had seen the abyss and walked through it unscathed. Seraphine exhaled. The legends were true. The humans had come. But would they be enough? The Marad Dominion's fleet arrived, at dawn, like a storm descending upon the planet. The sky darkened as wave after wave of warships streaked through the clouds. The Velmarans held their breath, staring at the unstoppable force above them. Inside the command center, Rael Darien studied the incoming fleet with the keen eyes of a predator. "They're testing us," he murmured. "Looking for weaknesses, Lieutenant." Kalis stood beside him, relaying new orders. The humans did not panic. They did not hesitate. Then, with calculated precision, they struck first. The human warship unleashed its fury, its weaponry tearing through the Marad formations. The Velmaran defensive forces, emboldened by their allies, joined the fight. Explosions lit up the sky. Enemy ships shattered under the coordinated assault. The battle raged on, each moment more brutal than the last, and for the first time in history, the Marad Dominion retreated. The Velmaran stared in disbelief. The impossible had just happened. The humans had turned the tide. Though the Marad Dominion had suffered a humiliating retreat, they were far from defeated. As the shattered remnants of their fleet limped away from Velmara's orbit, their supreme warlord, General Zyrek, issued a single, chilling command to his forces. "Mobilize everything. Wipe them out." Across the Marad-controlled sectors of space, fleets upon fleets of warships were gathered, soldiers armed, and battle plans drawn. They would not just return to conquer Velmara, they would destroy it. When the humans and Velmarans received the news, the reality of their situation became clear. The next battle would decide everything. In the grand war chamber, the air was thick with tension, as Commander Rael Darien, Elder Seraphine, and their respective war councils prepared for, the inevitable confrontation. Rael studied the Murad fleet projections with an unshakable intensity. Even among Velmara's most seasoned leaders, he was the calmest person in the room. "They're throwing everything they have at us," Seraphine murmured, gripping the edges of the table. "This is their final attempt to break us." Rael nodded, a steely determination in his eyes. "Then we'll make this their last battle." A grim silence followed. Everyone in the room knew the odds were against them. The Murad's fleet would outnumber and outgun them 10-1. But Rael didn't believe in odds. He believed in strategy. Turning to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Kalis Voss, he began issuing rapid orders. "We need to set up orbital defenses around Velmara's weakest points. If we funnel their forces into narrow corridors of fire, we can force them into a kill zone." Kalis nodded, already calculating strike patterns and attack formations. Seraphine, listening to the humans plan their counterattack, found herself mesmerized by their methodical, ruthless efficiency. These were not mere soldiers, they were survivors. The Murad Dominion returned in full force. Their warships darkened the skies, blotting out the twin suns. The ground shook with the thunder of incoming fire. From orbit, the enemy unleashed wave after wave of destruction, but this time Velmara was ready. The moment the enemy breached the planet's atmosphere, the Terran-Velmara alliance struck back. Human and Velmaran warships moved in perfect unison, weaving between enemy formations, breaking them apart piece by piece. On the ground, Velmaran, warriors fought side by side with human soldiers, their energy rifles and plasma cannons cutting through Murad invaders with deadly precision. And at the heart of it all was Rael Darrian, leading the charge with the kind of fearless determination that made legends. As the battle raged on, the Murad flagship descended, an unstoppable force armed with a planet-killer weapon. If it reached the capital, Velmara would be reduced to ashes. Rael and Kalis exchanged a glance. They both knew what had to be done. "Seraphine," Rael called over the comms, "we need to hit that flagship with everything we have." Seraphine's voice came through, calm, resolved. "Then let's end this." A final, desperate attack plan was set in motion. Velmaran warships formed a protective ring around the capital, while human fighter squadrons cut through the enemy like fire through dry grass. Then Rael led his elite strike team straight toward the enemy flagship. With guns blazing and engines screaming, their ships dove through a storm of enemy fire. One by one their squad members fell, but Rael never wavered. They breached the flagship's defenses, fought their way through hordes of Murad warriors, and reached the control core. Rael planted the final explosive charge himself. "Mission complete," he muttered, pressing the detonator. The flagship exploded. The blast ripped through the Murad fleet, severing their command structure. Their forces, now leaderless, fell apart. And just like that, the war was over. The Velmaran capital stood in ruins, but it still stood. Velmara had survived. Its people, once fragile and afraid, now stood shoulder to shoulder with the humans, knowing that they had earned this victory together. As the dust settled, Seraphine turned to Rael, gratitude shining in her weary eyes. "You and your people didn't just save Velmara," she said. "You changed everything." Rael exhaled, gazing at the battlefield. "No, we changed everything together." Word of the Alliance's victory spread across the stars. Once, the Velmarans had been seen as weak. Once, humanity had been feared. Now they were symbols of unity and defiance. Soon, other planets rose up against the Marad Dominion. Emboldened by Velmara's triumph, the galactic balance of power had shifted, and it had all begun with a single call for help. In the days that followed, Velmarans and humans worked together to rebuild, their alliance stronger than ever. At the heart of it all were Seraphine and Rael, their friendship now a legend of its own. As Rael prepared to return to Terra, Seraphine met him at the landing dock. "Promise me you'll return," she said. "We have a galaxy to rebuild." Rael smirked, clasping her forearm in a warrior's grip. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." As his ship took off into the stars, Seraphine knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. Because now Velmara and Terra were bound together, not by war, but by something far stronger, an unbreakable alliance. And across the stars, the legend of Velmara and Terra began to spread, a story of hope, resilience, and the undeniable truth that when two worlds stood together, they could change the fate of the galaxy.